A lot of fun. It was a lot of fun getting kind of a, I don't know, blow-by-blow description or following with John his 1 year stay, 6 months turning into a year, stay there in China. And when he got back, I hoped that he would come to us and give us a first-hand explanation of where the heck he's been all this time. So I've been waiting for this one. Help me welcome John Merritt.
Thank you, Michael. It's I can't tell you what a pleasure it is for me to actually have a chance to be part of this wonderful, long history of your work in bringing arts to our area, going back for a long time. I also want to say I'm extremely relieved, since this is my first time, and as our first poet said, you're all guinea pigs. Will you also be my guinea pigs, I'm afraid, for my first attempt to speak about these travels in public. However, I am very relieved with the incredible talent that has already performed tonight, that I will not have to worry about whether you've gotten your $5 worth or not, because clearly you've gotten way more than that money's worth already, and I feel very honored to be in such company. I will quickly just say for the record and for legal purposes that the text that I'll be reading and the photographs that I'll be showing you are all my copyright over the last couple of years, and I do hope to work some of these materials into other media, looking for the right place to do some of these things in book form at some point. The quick background is I went to China in 1999 for business, a short, relatively short business trip of about 6 weeks, and absolutely, profoundly fell in love with the country of China. I did not have a clue of what China was really like. Considering myself to be pretty far to the left of center, I wasn't buying into the red communist menace, but I certainly did not have a clue about what modern China was about. And in that 6-week period, it became very clear to me that I needed to go back again for a much longer time. And as luck would have it, opportunities to teach English for native English speakers of, as you can see, almost any age, at any point in their life, are in tremendous demand in China. And I was taught this by some friends when they learned that I wanted to go back. And I was very fortunate to be engaged at a college in China for a year to teach English. It was a fully supported position. I was provided housing and a salary which allowed me to live at the higher part of the social strata, even though it really wasn't very much money by U.S. standards. You are provided travel to and from the country, and you are actually provided a substantial amount of time in breaks, and also you are given some travel allowance. Now, distilling a full year, that, as Michael said, was supposed to be 6 months, distilling that year into a presentation for you tonight has been one of the most challenging things I've ever done, and I learned early in the process that I really needed to keep a focus to keep this unified tonight. And in order to do that, I've cut out a lot of what the peripheral things were, trips all over to different parts of China. I could easily spend the night talking about Shanghai or Beijing or Hainan Dao, a beautiful southern island. But those are all really, as I thought about the year, and what really mattered to me, peripheral to the chief experience, which was my going to China and being a teacher again, which is what I was supposed to be and did for a short time, a long time ago, before I embarked on a business career that has gone many places, most recently into the world of environmental consulting. So, what you will see tonight, or hear tonight, are excerpts from, as Michael said, what I called Notes from China. I had a distribution list of friends and family that grew and grew to be over 250 as people kept passing it out to other folks. And they were simply my journal, written pretty much as often as I took the time or had the inspiration to do it. And what I will read tonight are excerpts from those notes. And I will use some pictures to try to illustrate some of the places and some of the people who really mattered to me during that time. And what I've chosen to focus on is my experience in the small, and I say small by Chinese standards, 2 million people. It's a tiny Chinese city, 2 or 3 times the size of Boston in sheer population. Way off the beaten track. Very different from any of the large cities. They never had foreign visitors before about 12 years ago. So the folks in this city were it's a very traditional Chinese city. It's a small mining town. And what I'm going to focus on is my trip there and my teaching primarily, and some of what happened in the city of Huaibei. And I hope that you will enjoy that presentation. We're going to start basically at 4:50 in the afternoon on Tuesday, August 3rd, 2004. This is my new home. And this picture, we're starting, you start trips at train stations or airports and things like that. So we are starting at a train station tonight. It's not the train station I'm about to talk about because I don't have a picture of Shanghai. But this is Beijing's older of 2 train stations, and as you can see, it's a pretty crowded place. And I begin traveling on the overnight train to Huaibei from Shanghai is an experience I won't soon forget. One of its least appealing features is the departure time, scheduled at 11:17 p.m. This means that one arrives at the incredibly busy railway station after an evening of Shanghai-style eating and drinking, already quite overfed and weary. Under normal circumstances, this may not be a very big deal. However, when traveling with enough baggage to tax a large elephant, additional challenges do arise. Since my stay in Huaibei will range from the current mid to high 90s Fahrenheit to the sub-freezing snow-laden winter, I had to pack enough clothes and footwear to get me through. I had been warned several times by Chinese friends and others experienced in travel here that I would not be able to find clothes or footwear in my size. A brief encounter with a merchant in Shanghai pretty much confirmed that fact when uproarious laughter was the only response to my hand gestures asking if she had shorts in my size. The only pair she proffered was very large by Chinese standards and had an elastic waistband which, when stretched to its max, made it about 2/3 of the way around. But I should return to the train. Pat and I had, more background. Pat, my wife, came to China with me, spent some time in Shanghai, and traveled with me in the very beginning to see the city where I lived before she had to return home. Pat and I had the very good fortune of being accompanied by my employer, College Foreign Affairs Director, Mr. Xia, his wife, Wang Shuhua, his daughter, Nancy, and his colleague, Mr. Yi. And I'm going to take a moment to show you a few pictures. This is Mr. Xia and his daughter, Nancy. This is actually on the train. This is Xia with his mother and his father. This is from much later in the trip, but it was actually in the parents' tiny village far from the city. This is Xia with his grandfather and his father, 3 generations. This is Yi, the fellow I'm about to talk about, and Xia. These guys are dearest friends and 2 of the best people I've ever known in my life. This is Shuhua, Nancy, and Xia. This is the family, and it's the total family with the 1-child policy. And here I had to throw this in because it tells a little more about Xia than I would probably be able to say if I spent all night. He's one of the most all-around and most interesting guys I know, and here he is jumping the long jump in the annual sports meet. He's not a young man, he's certainly not as old as I am, but he actually won this event. They helped me from the moment we left the hotel, managing to fit all 4 large bags and 5 or 6 smaller bags, laptop, etc., into the relatively small space of 2 taxi trunks. After a typical Shanghai taxi ride, a demolition derby with collisions only avoided at the last possible second, we arrived at the train station where Mr. Yi began a negotiation with 2 porters to carry the bags onto the train. The discussion was animated and at times heated to the point that might cause concern at home. However, I've learned that negotiating is taken very seriously here, and it is the measure of the negotiator to get a truly good deal. Raised voices are only a sign of a serious bargaining session well joined. Yi and Xia struck a deal and then up a long escalator and down a cavernous main terminal passageway until entering a waiting area about 100 yards long by about 75 yards wide, with rows and rows of seats, all full to overflowing with folks waiting for 2 late departing trains, ours and another scheduled for about 11:15. We wedged ourselves into a side area near the open and breezy windows. Remember, it's about 95 degrees still in the evening. A porter, one of our porters, informed us that the train would be boarding late as it had not yet entered the station. Not good news. About half the 700 to 1,000 souls and their bags emptied out of the waiting area when the other train arrived and was announced for boarding. It was truly an amazing thing to see that many people in a station waiting for trains leaving that late at night. It was Sunday night, the end of a weekend, but I was told it was a fairly typical number of people. And I should add, this was one of about 25 waiting rooms this size in that station. Finally, our train did arrive, and Yi, Mrs. Xia, and our porter somehow scrambled to the beginning of the queue and through the mass of waiting people to get our bags on the train in the proper car near the appointed sleeping berths. This maneuver allowed us to wait with Xia until a majority of people had left the waiting area and board the train very easily. Incredible courtesy and assistance has been the hallmark of all my Chinese friends, and I am completely humbled. As we boarded car number 4, the conductor exchanged a metal ticket indicating our exact sleeping position for our paper ticket. If we had been getting off before Huaibei, the terminus of this train, the conductor would have placed the paper ticket in a special slot in his leather folio and made sure we did not sleep through the ticketed station. Very organized and considerate approach, in my opinion. The exchange is reversed before departing the train, as the paper ticket must be shown to exit the train station. Sleeping cars are arranged with 3 levels of berths perpendicular to the side of the car, head to the windowed wall and feet to the window. Head to the windowed wall and feet to the windowed passageway. Berths were arranged in groups of 6, separated by solid walls upon which the berths were hung. The bottom is most expensive, no climbing required. I'll go back here for a moment, and you can see these little ladders that you have to negotiate to get to the second and the third berths. Well, they're only about this wide. And imagine just imagine the middle of the night. The bottom is the most expensive, no climbing required, and the top is least expensive, most climbing and above the window. About 2 to 3 feet separate the 2 sets of 3 berths in each plot of 6. Xia did not yet know just how loudly I snore. So he had not banished me to another car with Yi, a known snorer. He had me with his family, much to the amusement of his 13-year-old daughter Nancy, who I learned in the morning did a lot of laughing after I fell asleep before anyone else. First awake at about 5:30, I took a seat across from the foot of my berth and watched a whole new China pass by my window. This is compared to where I experienced in large cities. A man herded ducks with a long, yellow, flag-tipped whippy stick, not quite as hard as herding cats, but along the same lines. Men rode water buffalo as mile after mile of corn, other crops, and large expanses of lotus in watery areas sped by. Small mud and brick houses with thatched roofs bordered lagoons. Men were fishing with very long and flexible bamboo fishing rods. Folks living in these areas were already up and about their exercises or other tasks. A few shots that I actually took from the train. Stations had vendors along the platform with carts full of instant noodles and many other snacks. Here you can see the snacks. You know, the station stops are short. As you can see, they don't always use the door. I mean, people literally are jumping in and out of the windows in these stations. It's really quite remarkable. I was very happy to get this. It's a little cloudy because it's through a dirty window. By 6:30, most passengers were heading for the washroom with toothbrush to start the day. Pots of instant noodles came to life all around and people brewed their first tea. By 8 a.m., everyone was awake and chatting, feeding little ones, exercising, or just listening to the music piped through the train at that hour. A fascinating mix of traditional Chinese music with classic instruments, martial music, marches, and nearly unrecognizable American tunes. After Nancy, Yi, and I had a nice round of the children's hand-slapping game, you know, the one where you have to put your hands on top and you try to slap, yours truly, the acknowledged champion, she retired to her middle berth with a pen and napkin. In a few minutes, she presented me with a truly remarkable likeness of your faithful correspondent, which I will frame and cherish forever. We pulled into Huaibei on time, 9:30 a.m. It was clear immediately that Huaibei was a long way from Shanghai, starting with the small, almost sleepy train station surrounded by tiny shops and open markets, to the very small, well-beaten taxis waiting for fares. The modest dress and disposition of the people, and the way they stared at the extremely rare non-Chinese further reinforced our distance from the new and open China. Two vehicles from the college met us and drove about 10 minutes to my campus apartment, where we dragged the bags to my 5th floor walk-up. This is the entrance, actually it's the back entrance nearest to my apartment to the college, which was the Huaibei Coal Industry Teachers College. And this picture is actually the building where my apartment actually is. It's in that second row of windows, second from the top. It looks a little bit blue above the red signs, as was my apartment. With that, I was left to explore my new space, consisting of a spacious master bedroom, smaller second bedroom, sitting dining room with table, chairs, computer, bottled water dispenser, TV, and refrigerator. Two-part bathroom with basin and washing machine in one area and a Western-style toilet and shower together in another, completely tiled room with a drain in the floor. A nice-sized kitchen with 2 gas burners, a microwave and all the utensils necessary, and finally a small veranda off of the smaller bedroom with an outdoor shelf where I will have potted plants and an inside and outside clothesline. It is fully furnished and there is one working air conditioner in the larger bedroom. The smaller bedroom will serve as my study, as it has a nice desk and good shelves for books. I think it may be possible to attract some of the birds I see flying around the area if I set up a feeding station off the veranda. Since that arrival a few days ago, it has been a whirlwind of exquisite meals and wonderful folks helping me settle into my new home. I have stocked up on food and household items at a pretty modern supermarket. Today, she offered a tour of campus, including the offices of the Foreign Language Department, FLD, where I'm employed. Later, he arranged a car to visit the Bank of China, where I exchanged some dollars, and the police station, where I registered as a foreign expert, and finally on a grand tour of Huaibei and its environments, which took a grand total of about 15 or 20 minutes. It's a very, very small place. I'm finding myself feeling very much at home for now, though. I close very happy with the progress made so far and looking forward to preparing for my classes, which will begin on September 1st. We jump to a couple days later, same place, odds and ends. Huaibei is a very manageable size and very easy to get around. There are 4 major streets, 1st Street, 2nd Street, 3rd Street, and 4th Street, as well as cheap cabs and no meters. A ride anywhere in Huaibei is 4 or 5 yuan. As great as that is, buses are even better. There are buses to 1st and 2nd Streets right at the end of the short lane from my apartment, and the fare is 5 jiao. 10 jiao equal 1 yuan. 1 yuan equals approximately 12.5 cents. 100 yuan is about 12.50. At that time, it was still controlled, and it was almost exactly an 8-to-1 ratio. So this, this bus ride in U.S. dollars, which is not a good way to think about it because I wasn't being paid in U.S. dollars, but it's approximately a penny. Today we shopped at the free market, an absolutely incredible bazaar with several hundred licensed stalls selling any imaginable good from soap dishes to furniture and everything in between. Unlike the more formally organized stores on the main street, the free market runs perpendicular to 2nd Street but has dozens of corridors off the main path at right angles, lined with various vendors. It would be an easy matter to get very lost in this market until you have been through several times. Bargaining for price here is mandatory unless you simply want to overpay. I know I will do most of my shopping there and expect to see new items every time I visit. She and I share a deep interest in language and colloquial speech. This developed in almost 6 months of email correspondence before I ever went. With so many meal invitations and other assistance, I wanted to host all our benefactors for a meal. In typical fashion, Shia simply refused to do that until I insisted I could not be a freeloader. After I explained the term, he shared the expression iron chicken with me. Getting money from a cheapskate is like trying to pluck feathers from an iron chicken. In return, I offered one of my dad's favorites, like getting blood from a stone. Smiling, he helped me plan my thank you dinner, and it was a great time indeed. Morning walks and breakfast are 2 favorite activities in Huaibei and Shanghai, and frankly, any place in China. In the recent oppressive heat, early morning is the most comfortable time of day, and there is a virtual circus of activity. Folks using every means of transportation, from foot through regular bikes, bikes with a box truck body attached to the rear, and motorized versions of both, along with cars, taxis, and buses, all scrambling for the same right of way, lead me to expect a collision in every moment, especially when I'm in one of the taxis. However, in all this time, in both cities, I have seen only one bicycle-on-bicycle collision, very minor in Shanghai. What you learn very soon is that there is a very deliberate rhythm to the apparent confusion, and moreover, in the end, people are very careful and considerate of the other travelers the vast majority of the time. There are some aggressive honkers, and there's a general habit of honking horns to be clear to pedestrians ahead that something much bigger and harder than they are is just about to come their way. The goods carried on regular bicycles in balancing acts that would boggle the imagination are common, like 25-foot lengths of steel rebar used to reinforce new concrete, or 8 20-liter bottles. These are the Kuraboys of pure drinking water. Others have a box truck body on bicycle or motorbike and carry even more impressive loads. By and large, in Huaibei and Shanghai, buses act as if they own the road, and in fact, pretty much do. Breakfast in Shanghai on the street is a true cornucopia of choices. Fried bread with soy milk, steamed buns and dumplings filled with veggies, bean paste or meat, flatbread spread with scallions or other savory items are everywhere. On campus, a 5-minute walk reaches street vendors of the Huaibei breakfast sandwich, a skillet-grilled flatbread filled with scrambled eggs, and vegetables like scallions and spicy red leaf cabbage. This costs 1 yuan, 12 cents. Veggie dumplings, bean sprouts, and veggie omelets are also available with a nice cup of tea of 8 treasures. Is a fine way to start the day. And these were 2 of my favorite breakfast places. One of them doesn't look like breakfast particularly. Those are noodles, but we did eat them for breakfast. And these are some incredible dumplings, and this was my very interesting favorite shop. In any event, after this time, Pat and I returned to Shanghai for a while. We visited with some friends. Pat went home and I took the train back to Huaibei. It's now toward the end of August. It's on the 27th of August. After about 30 years, I am buzzing with the energy and excitement of a new school year and find it every bit as heady as ever before. Unique circumstances and not knowing how I will do have me geared up to go. Classes will finally begin Monday. Classes will finally begin Monday morning, and I can put surmise and speculation aside and meet my students. Okay. Now classes begin. I finished my 3rd of 4 class days. I'm sorry, we're now on September 1st. I have finished my 3rd of 4 class days this first week of term, and I'm exceedingly happy to report that my conception from far away of what teaching here would be like has so far proven pretty much to be true. A great deal of this has to do with 2 things: my detailed pre-trip email exchange with Shia, and Peter Hessler's superb book, River Town, 2 Years on the Yangtze. Hessler did what I'm doing in 1998, 1999, and his lucid account has prepared me for much that might have been surprising. You may have read Peter Hessler in The New Yorker, where he is the Beijing correspondent and regularly contributes wonderful articles to The New Yorker. My experience has met or exceeded expectations regarding classroom quality of life. My students are enthusiastic, friendly, welcoming, and after many years as English majors in the language, they're speaking my native tongue pretty darn well in some cases, and generally quite acceptably. There is work for me to do with them, and they have already begun to work, and I've already begun to work on pronunciation and grammar as they speak. They accept my coaching with grace and appreciation, smiling broadly when after many repeats I let them know they got it right. While baseball is barely known in China, they have been quite ready to hear my love of the game and the Red Sox as I introduce myself in each of my 8 classes. I also ask each student to state their Chinese and English names. I record their English names in my book, and I try to say their Chinese name, generally met with gales of laughter as I tangle my tongue and tones hopelessly. Once in a while, I hit one spot on and actually get excited applause and big smiles. Students tell me 2 or 3 things about themselves. Like 19 to 22-year-old kids at home, my students love sports, music, chatting face-to-face and by computer, TV, movies, reading, and sleeping. Sleeping was very high on the list. There are artists. This sounds terrible, but it seemed more so among the women. But I didn't take it. Wasn't a scientific survey, and I want to be careful there. There are artists, historians, actors, musicians, writers, and scientists. Most ask me a question about family, former jobs, hobbies, and what I've done in or like about China. I like the last questions best because I am completely intrigued with the people and culture of this immensely interesting place. When asked if I like Shanghai, Hangzhou, or Huaibei best, there are blank stares when I tell them it is Huaibei. When I joke about how money evaporates walking the streets of the big cities, they laugh and agree. The deeper part is the sense of being where I want to be right now. Thanks entirely to the growing number of people, including my students, who make me feel at home in this small Chinese city about 7,500 miles from home. Move to November. It's kind of a big jump here in time. odds and ends, walk signs and traffic lights. The walk, don't walk signs are really neat here. The walk light starts as a typical green pedestrian stick figure. Instead of flashing when it's time to hurry, however, these signs animate the legs so the figure appears to be running.
Love it.
I don't know why exactly, but every time I see the little legs start running, I smile and get moving. Traffic lights have overhead countdown timers to show how long the light will last. Typical is 40 seconds, and there is no yellow between green and red. The green just starts flashing about 3 seconds before changing to red. Red lights also flash about the same time before turning to green. Cell phone. I cannot imagine being without my local cell phone for text messaging. For one jiao, one can send short text messages to another cell phone much less expensively than a phone call. I know it is available at home and most kids use it all the time. I had no idea how great it really is until I started using it like everyone else here to communicate with colleagues, friends, and students. Now spammers, what else? Send unsolicited ads, all in Mandarin, so I'm not quite so offended. Mining. This is a major coal mining region. Though there seem to be other rocks or minerals mined as well, the primary method of mining coal is to blast the area to be mined with some pretty darn large charges at all hours of the day and night and on any of the 7 days of the week. It is sporadic, but definitely can get your attention. At first, I was quite startled by some, which while actually quite far away from here, sounded like they were in the next apartment. Surprisingly, I hardly noticed this anymore. Jump to December 11th. With only 3 weeks before final exams begin, my whole focus lately has been upon my students and my classes. I wish I could say I have learned every name, but at least I can say hello by name to a pretty large number of my students outside of class where they are not sitting in seats keyed to my class book. I have also started to really have a feel for each student's strengths and challenges. Many have asked for extra opportunities to practice conversation, and I am finding ways to accommodate them individually and a class at a time in more informal ways. It is a close call who has learned more, students or teacher, but it is absolutely no contest with respect to who has been moved the most. I was already impressed with the diligence, seriousness, and enthusiasm my students brought to class each day. These qualities were apparent from the beginning. But over the past 8 weeks, their group discussions and debates on current topics, book and movie reviews, and finally, this week's reflection and reminiscence about their grandparents has tested my entire emotional range, from high comedy to deep tragedy and everything in between. Student campus life. Before sharing some wonderful classroom moments, let me tell you a little bit about what daily life is like for these students. Almost all students live in dorms at the opposite end of the campus from where I live. Some are new, but several are really old. Students sleep 8 to a room in bunk beds and share one desk. Each floor has a washroom and toilets, but showers are about 1/8 of a mile away and are only open from 2:30 to 7:30 p.m. Imagine sub-zero and you have to run out to get a shower and then run back. Electricity is on only from 6 p.m. until 11 p.m. The heat, this was December 11th, the heat has not yet been turned on in the dorms or the classrooms. Small shops near the dorms sell newspapers, food, or other necessities, including boiled water in large thermos bottles to make tea and to wash. It's quite a sight to walk by this place and see hundreds of brightly covered thermos bottles, each inscribed with its owner's name, waiting for pickup on the front wall. Across the street from campus are several small and inexpensive noodles, bread dumpling shops, as well as street vendors of everything from mutton on skewers to the flatbread and egg sandwiches I've become so fond of. No food is served in the dormitories. What we talk about. My main job, this fellow's name is Mango. Great name. My main job here is to get my students to stop being very shy and speak as much and as often as possible. I'm very proud that all 8 of my classes have been active and engaged, and almost all my students regularly speak out loud, often at the front of the class. For book reviews and remembering grandparents, students spoke alone and then responded to my questions. Other times, teams prepare topics together, using English only. During the first period, all classes were 2 periods with a break in between. They would prepare during the first period, followed by debates or other presentations by team representatives after the break. In debates, teams must debate both sides of the question of the day. And now we move to Christmas Eve Day, December 24th. Merry Christmas to all. Christmas Eve on this side of the planet, and I feel the full 7,500 miles from home. Even so, the best parts of my favorite holiday abound, thanks to my family who shopped and shipped early, ensuring an abundance under my little tabletop Christmas tree, and continuing with many friends and colleagues who shared greetings over the internet, and finally here in Hawaii Bay, my students and friends. I'm amply and humbly blessed this Christmas. I arrived in one classroom to find a large, fully decorated and lit Christmas tree and beautifully wrapped gift of string art. In another, I returned from the break to find another package, wrapped and a card signed in rainbow colors by all the members of the class. The package contained a teddy bear with a Santa hat that I have been charged with naming. Right now, Miracle is a strong contender. At the start of another class, a student stood up to announce that the class had a gift for me. They stood and sang in English the most beautiful rendition of Silent Night I ever heard. They were delighted to learn it was my favorite Christmas carol. In response to their request, and after clearing my throat and tear ducts, I sang a respectable version of Jingle Bells because I could remember all the words. Several teams of fantastic student volunteers are helping me stage a Christmas party for my students and friends here on Sunday. On Wednesday, one group and I walked to markets I had no idea existed to buy goods at excellent prices that the students haggled for. They then took 100 pairs of child-sized socks back to their dorm to stuff with candy, nuts, and toys, tying each clothes with a bright red string for party favors. Later today, I will hit the food stores with another team to get the general food goodies. Several live student musical performances are scheduled, and I will read Christmas poetry, including The Night Before Christmas, which I probably last recited in a school pageant when I was about 10, along with excerpts from A Child's Christmas in Wales. Grandparents. I hadn't recognized the very personal history lesson I would receive when I assigned a topic from their book, Remembering Your Grandparents. This topic took 3 weeks for all students to present and led up to the final exam, and was an unbelievable emotional experience for all of us. The grandparents of my students had adult experience of the Sino-Japanese War, the Revolution, the Cultural Revolution, periods of widespread poverty and starvation, and finally, the new opening and emergence of modern China today. Some described kindly folks who treated youngsters well, giving them treats or cooking delicious favorite foods for them. Others told of stiff and traditional folks whose feet had been bound if they were women, or who favored boys over girls to an extreme that left some women students in tears. Some started wealthy and experienced extreme reversals of fortune. During periods of starvation, there were so many stories of surviving grandparents raising families on their own and somehow managing to find a way to educate their children in the process. The stories of life on farms with long and hard work but slightly better access to food were contrasted with peasants trying to get by in the larger cities and difficult industrial surroundings. In all of these stories, a powerful grit and determination to survive and make a better life for their children emerges very clearly. Many students became very emotional, along with me, as they recall being in school or otherwise unavailable to see a beloved grandparent one last time before they passed away. As they got to these moments, I began to ask them to speak the words out loud they would have said if they had made it in time. And in doing so, they seemed to find some relief and occasionally even a smile. Other stories were about the daily and apparently requisite quarreling between Grandpa and Grandma, only to be followed by profound loneliness and loss when one left the other in death. Expected passing of the survivor in a relatively short time was also repeated often. Saddest stories were about suicide, and one that still haunts me is a grandma who prepared a meal of whole fish and gave it to her husband's mother during difficult times rather than sharing it with her own family. When the matriarch died after choking on a fishbowl, the family tortured the cook with recriminations that she had been responsible for this death until she took her own life with poison rather than endure this shame. There are many war stories about grandpa generals and privates, with and without medals. Many carry shrapnel or bullet holes to this day, as well as a military outlook and discipline applied to the chagrin of the receiving grandchildren. There were made and lost fortunes, generally attributed to a crooked accountant or other cheat, with the resulting debt load shared by the whole family for generations. Some grandmas always cooked delicious food, but some couldn't cook very well at all, but still persisted. And those are the ones that were remembered most because they just never quit. Most were constitutionally unable to visit a child's home without taking over all the housework. And many of these grandmas still walk so fast that their grandchildren can barely keep up. And that is if they were even awake early enough for the morning constitutional. Profligate grandpas smoke, drink, and play cards or mahjong constantly to the chagrin of their families. I would love to meet the 86-year-old who has chain smoked all his adult life and still rides his bicycle everywhere. Another smoker of over 40 years gave up one day, explaining he did not want to end up a burden for his family. And one of my favorites, one grandfather and grandson exchanged riding lessons. Grandpa teaching grandson how to ride a water buffalo, while grandson tried to teach Grandpa how to ride a bicycle. Grandpa never quite got the hang of the two-wheeler, presenting a danger to himself and others. But a heavy-duty tricycle with ample cargo carrier has now cut his trip to the distant market place in half compared to walking, and he likes it very much indeed. And jump now to February, the time of the Lunar New Year. This is the Spring Festival. You all may be aware that we've only just recently, the 28th of January, entered the year of the dog. And Spring Festival is without question the biggest event in China, and there's almost no way to describe it adequately. After hearing from students and friends for months about how huge the Spring Festival, Lunar New Year celebration would be, I worried about having inflated expectations. Nothing could be farther from the truth. I just basically started taking the whole week. I'm only going to talk about a couple of days tonight. Suffice to say, about what I'm about to describe for the 2 days continued for the better part of 2 weeks. Sunday, she and I went downtown to stock up on fireworks and purchase red envelopes to present traditional money gifts to children during the holiday. The envelopes were easy to find in the free market, so we turned to the sidewalk stands selling colorful fountains, small spinning or sparkling numbers, bottle rockets, and twirling buzz flyers through mega strings of all sizes, from lady fingers to 3-inch salutes. Seriously loud salutes and a wide range of Roman candle-style tubes and medium-sized skyrockets that shot a wide variety of colorful, sparkling or noisy charges into the air, to the cream of the crop, the serious multiple rocket batteries. These started at 5 or 6 inches, with 9 or 16 shots, to really huge rockets boxed 32 a set, over 2 feet tall. These babies are about 4 inches in diameter, and I had to have some. Anyone who knows me well knows that this was a beautiful moment for me. After a lot of haggling, we carried home 2 super strings of 3-inch salutes. That's about 1,000 shots per string, and the rocket batteries. They were to be my contribution to the festivities at Shia's house a couple days later. This day, that particular Sunday, here being equivalent in shopping frenzy to the last weekend day before Christmas at home, the buses and taxis were all very seriously oversubscribed, and bitter cold winds bearing freezing rain only exacerbated the problem. I was feeling very guilty that faithful Shia, with no gloves or hat, was dragged into this circumstance wherein we had to wait a very long time before we could get a ride home with a heavy load of ordnance. We were mighty cold. The roads were so slick, the taxi we finally got would not even attempt the final steep hill to Shia's house, where we would store the fireworks until Tuesday evening. So we climbed the treacherous slope, gingerly on foot, loaded down with lots of ordnance. Monday, I started the day with an early trip to the food market nearby to stock up on fruit and dumplings because the stores and markets would be closed. For good measure, I added a 3rd mega string of 3-inch salutes to my collection. Then I could not find a cab to drive me to the far suburbs of Huaibei, where I was invited by a student to join her family to eat and socialize. After an hour of that, in the same bitter cold and light snow as the day before, I bargained with a driver to accept 40 kwai. Kwai is another word for yuan, approximately 4 times the normal fare, for a snowy, treacherous ride of over a half hour. It is a coal mining family in their home, which is unheated and not well sealed to the outside, and by this time, I'm not mentioning at this time, the temperatures are basically below 0 here, equivalent of below 0 here, minus quite a bit centigrade. To get to the upstairs, which is unheated and not well sealed to the outside, it is very near a still active coal mine on the southern outskirts of the city where the father works. To get to the upstairs bedrooms where my student sleeps, one takes an outdoor stairway. A barrel near the front entrance held the water used for cooking or other purposes, and the bathroom consists of an outdoor facility, also with no running water, about 2 blocks from the house. There is electricity, and electric blankets make the nights far more bearable than they were before they had electricity. The incredible warmth and generosity of the family's welcome contrasted sharply with these difficult living circumstances. The moment I arrived, the whole family greeted me, and this was typical everywhere as a foreigner, including our grandfather, mother, father, another aunt and uncle, and a bunch of cousins, as well as half the close-by neighbors, since foreigners were very rare in this neighborhood, given that there are only 4 I know of in the entire city of over 2 million. I was seated and plied with sunflower seeds, raisins, peanuts, and candy. A popular homemade snack looks like very large Doritos, 2 or 3 inches square, but are thinner and home fried. These have a wonderful sweet, herbed, or spicy, unsalted flavor and melt in your mouth, literally. Soon we all gathered for a most incredible meal, including 3 kinds of fish, including a whole fresh fish and wonderful pecan sauce, duck, mutton, beef, pork, chicken, mushroom and vegetable dishes, 2 or 3 versions of tofu, bean curd, preserved duck eggs with garlic and oil, a wonderful freshly made unsweetened cornbread, about 1/4 inch thick and an elongated 4 inches in diameter, sweet steamed sticky rice with various fruits, nuts, and raisins embedded in, 3 kinds of soup, and the holiday traditional requisite standard dumplings, handmade and steamed on the spot. Throughout the feast, there were many toasts with the whole family, though father, young uncle, and I were the only ones drinking baijiu, something that we could take a whole night talking about, but it's strong stuff and very popular. After eating, we played mahjong for several hours before my student's young uncle and her friend accompanied me back to the end of the city by bus at a much more acceptable fare of 1.5 kwai. Next day is actually the Lunar New Year Eve. This is the big night. I spent most of this day and night with Shia and his family, starting at lunchtime when I was invited for a light home-cooked lunch with him and his wife and daughter. This light lunch consisted of tender spare ribs, homemade pickle of pepper and garlic with oil, green summer-type squash, cucumbers, soup with quail eggs and pork meatballs, a spam-like meat and vegetable dish, and the requisite dumplings. I actually put together a couple of these freshly made babies of meat, and there was some meat and there were some vegetables, some boiled and some pan-fried, and all absolutely delicious. The dumplings I constructed were actually quite ugly, but tasted just fine. Grapes, oranges, and apples finished off this repast, which was accompanied by a modest amount of baijiu. After that, fortunately, there was time for a nice nap before the evening festivities got underway, this time at a wonderful local restaurant where Shia had reserved a cozy private room. Most of his wife Wang Shua's family were at this meal, including her mother and father, 2 brothers and their families, for a total of about 14 people, with 2 grandparents and 3 children. It was for this meal that I needed the special red envelopes to give the traditional money gifts to the children. The menu for this meal, the menu for this meal was very extensive and also included very generous amounts of baijiu. Dishes included fried crab that was so perfectly cooked that the shell became edible, even though it was not soft-shell crab. And the meat inside was superbly spiced. Roasted duck heads with strips of neck meat were popular with the children. Succulent stewed duck meat eaten in tofu pancakes. Thin sliced strips of spicy pig ears. Chewy pig's feet and sautéed pig intestines. Superb fish, sliced beef, incredibly rich eel, a personal favorite, with cashews, spicy stewed chicken with flatbread dumplings baked on the inside of the dish it was cooked in, classic spicy mutton with flour, pancakes, Sichuan, eggplants, standard blocks of white, and also sizzling tofu, the latter an incredible golden brown on the outside in a wonderful sauce. Rich, earthy mushroom soup, an amazing sweet soup with eggs stirred in, peanuts, cucumbers, sweet bean, paste pie with top and bottom crusts, and watermelon. There was not a soul that did not leave the table groaning in satiated satisfaction. The brisk air outside of Shia's home was a welcome setting for our family display of fireworks, including some brought along by Shia's and my good friend Yi and his son. Truly, it was not necessary to have your own, since they were simply going off everywhere all the time. There were all kinds, smaller bottle rockets, I won't go through them. Super strings were being hung out windows and lit off. The noise was simply unbelievable. And we did our share as well. I added the 2 super strings and 500 3-inchers, as well as rockets I had bought earlier. I had a 3rd super string which I wanted to do outside my own apartment, to be sure the evil spirits vacated my premises as well. But that was a little later. We saved one of the strings and the rocket battery to fire off as our little grand finale. And if I do say so myself, it was not too shabby. The rockets, as you know, are in a battery of 30, and they went very high. Each was a great flower or sizzling or whistling burst when reached top altitude. Those 30 shots, backed by the incredible percussion of the super string, was enough to, well, wake the dead or get the heart of any already living soul really pounding. Yi, she, and I then went down the hill to my place, and we set off a few more items, including the final super string that I hope banished any dark vapors hovering around, trying to infect the pure and clean Lunar New Year of the rooster last year. That finished at about 10 p.m. and I retired to my balcony, and it's exceptionally great view to watch the unbelievable show that continued through all of my 270 degrees non-stop until midnight, when truly more fireworks than I could possibly imagine all went off at once from so many windows all over the streets, backyards, and anywhere where there were people. The individual pieces firing became indistinguishable in an intensely spectacular blaze of crackling roar that went on for about a half an hour, with major skyrockets everywhere. If there was any doubt earlier, any spirits still lurking within the confines of the fair city of Huaibei were sent packing. Somewhere else, I know not where. It was at least 2 hours before there was relative quiet, with only periodic blast bursts and crackles from assorted directions. Move to March 27th. Flying kites. A couple weeks ago, on a fine weekend day, I went to a lakefront park to fly kites with a bunch of friends, including other expats from a school across town. My kite is the likeness of a famous character from an extremely popular story here called Journey to the West, which has been made into many movies and serialized for TV. The Monkey King would be most people's popular choice, but I went for Jubajia, or Pig Boy, a half-man, half-pig character who is both somewhat tragic but also very comical. For a while he flew extremely well, but then took a dive for one of his several dips in the lake. Nonetheless, he was easily the great popular favorite with the large crowd of folks, mostly children, that came to watch the goofy foreigners fly their kites. Several of them offered assistance of all kinds when old Pig Boy just couldn't get up. In the end, it turns out structural weaknesses that I can fix resulted in his less than sterling performance. Fishing and catching. You don't know, because you haven't had all the notes, that I tried to catch fish a number of other places, never did, much like the TV show I did when Libby was at the Native Cable doing hers. I had a fishing show where I don't think we ever caught a single fish on camera. My producer is over here, we can check that out. Anyway, this entry is fishing and catching. One of my students, Song Di, Susie, whose home is in Huaibei, and her good friend from childhood, Feng Feng, took me out for a wonderful afternoon of fishing. We went to one of the many lakes that have resulted from spent coal mines settling, and it was quite beautiful to see, with many willow trees and flowering bushes around it. We walked into the fishing area through a healthy growing wheat field along paths between sections of the lakes, barely wide enough to walk on. We carried a fair bit of gear that made an interesting and completely new way of fishing for me. A key piece of gear, effectively each angler's headquarters, is a good-sized cooler fitted out with an array of braces and fittings for several attachments. These include a long rod resting appendage upon which the rod is typically seated awaiting the bite, and a bunch of other things I won't explain. Reels are absent, and each rod has a line just about as long as the rod, so lifting the rod tip straight up brings the hooks to just right about to the rod grip. Some rods here are as long and imposing as those I saw used in rivers in France. They are about 15 feet long and telescope. Others, including the rod I used, are 2-piece and about 8 to 9 feet. Very flexible and slender. Floats, twice as long and thinner than a pencil round out the gear. A bit of lead attached above the hooks drops the bait. Finally, an umbrella is attached to the back of the cooler. The other attachment all the others are on the end facing the water. So you got the rod going out this way, you got your umbrella and back, you sit on top of the box. It's all very neat. The angler sits comfortably on the cooler in personal shade, alternately flipping out the baited line, resting the rod in its holder until there's a bite, and landing or missing fish, then rebaiting. Fish are landed by simply raising the rod tip and swinging the fish in on the pendulum formed by the line. At the end of 6 hours, these people were very serious, in this sylvan setting, I had landed 45 fish. The largest logging in at about 4 inches at about 2 ounces. There were 4 or 5 silver species, all of which we call minnows, or in one case, maybe white perch. All fish are kept, however, and I learned why at dinner. Song Di's mother rinsed the fish, swimming 15 minutes earlier, dredged them in a spiced and herbed coarse cornmeal, and fried these little babies until they were crisp enough to eat, bones and all. Yummy just about sums up the entire experience. And now to the last piece. We move to June 16th. I will explain. I was originally supposed to stay for 1 semester. I couldn't stand to lose my students, and my students wanted me to stick around, and the school wanted me to stick around, and my wife very graciously allowed. Maybe it made her happy, I'm not sure, we'll check, but she was willing to do without me for another 6 months. So we are now at the end of the 2nd term, final exams. So far I'm very happy with the outcome of my somewhat novel exam design. I wanted to have some special time with all of my classes, like the Christmas party at the end of last term. I'm now 99% accurate, recognizing faces and names of all 280 of my students outside of class and their assigned seats. With this has come a closer feeling of knowing each as an individual as we close out the school year together. As time became 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. over 8 weekdays, to see all my students at my home in groups of 12 or less, depending on how they chose to sign up. I provide music, mahjong, Chinese chess, jump chess, we call Chinese checkers, Go, cards, snacks, and tea. I see each student alone, one-on-one, for about 8 minutes in my office for their exam, consisting of an oral conversation with me. These conversations have been very moving and provided a way to have a final and very personal goodbye conversation with each student. We have shared classroom anecdotes as well as personal stories of life, love, family, and friends. I'm pleasantly surprised at my ability to recollect something significant about almost every student during the year to mention to him or her. The dominant feeling I have at this point in time is being part of a very large extended family that I will leave soon. By choosing 12 students, I had unwittingly picked a very good number, since sophomore dorm rooms actually have 6, not the 8 that I had described earlier. That was a much earlier entry I had learned. As roommates, they tend to hang out and do things together, so that the 12 would typically each session include 2 sets of roommates. One of the really big benefits of that were a couple of those sets of roommates decided they would like to have fun and celebrate our time together by cooking a wonderful meal for me. So this is actually one of the 2 teams working in my kitchen. This is another team, different time, working in my kitchen. And what all their work resulted in were things like this.
Nice.
All whipped, it's just cooking and eating and all of that is just an unbelievable part of the Chinese experience. And I've honestly, consciously tried to keep some of the food descriptions out. People who were reading my emails were hungry all the time. There was nothing pre-assigned to be studied or memorized. They just had to speak with me in English, which in almost every case had in fact improved over the year. This was due to supporting and encouraging them not to be shy and not to worry about how they sounded or if they were perfect in every word, to just speak as often and as much as they could. Sure, during classes I would correct pronunciation, grammar, and word selection, but all in all that was minor compared to just giving them the courage and an environment in which to speak without fear of the constant nitpicking correction, which is sadly the core of most native teachers' approach to education. Indeed, starting with parents, these kids rarely hear about it when they do a good job, but always hear about every tiny mistake in some bizarre notion that this will create near-perfect students. It is the saddest observation of the educational system that I have made here, and there are some horrible examples which I chose not to share with you about how that works sometimes. There really are no adequate words to describe the deep joy I felt and still feel as some of the shyest students blossomed into good speakers, proud of their progress. Each exam also afforded me the chance for, as I said, a personal farewell and sharing one or two anecdotes. It was this more than anything that frequently left both of us reaching for the tissues, neither wanting to end our last moments together. As emotionally rigorous and draining as this was, I'm so happy that I did it this way. These are pictures of some of the guys playing games and stuff. I feel that I had the best chance. I had the chance with every single student to come to the best possible closure in the circumstances of my moving 7,500 miles away very soon. They all passed their exam and made me feel that I had passed mine as well. We exchanged our QQ numbers for the omnipresent chat software in China that will also work from the US, assuming I can get the English version up and installed when I get home. While we all promise to stay in touch, I know inevitably it will probably be only a few that will write over time as life overtakes all of us and rolls forward to new experience. This teaching experience leads me to wonder if I made a big mistake 30 or so years back when I left the teaching world for other vocations. I've enjoyed most of them, and many have been quite good to me. The past is the past, and I know I can't change it now. But there is something very special about teaching and helping young people grow and recognize their skills and potential. I will be forever grateful that I had this sabbatical from my career and the chance to have these wonderful students in my life. I do hope some will remain my friends forever. I will miss every one of them more than they will ever know. Whoops. We got to, we were supposed to stop with the students. This actually was another good friend of mine in China. This was Gersho 2. That's T-O-O. There was a Gersho 1. It's a cricket, by the way, for those of you not familiar. And this is a common pet in China, and this guy was, Gersho in Mandarin means singer, and this guy lived up to his name in spades. Anyway, that's what I have for you tonight. I realize I'm already running you very late here, and whatever. I'm perfectly happy, depending on the management's interest, if there are some questions. I know we can't go for very long, but if there are questions or anything anybody would like. Yeah, Jill.
How much Chinese did you speak before you went, and how much do you speak now, if any?
Just about the same before and after, which ain't much. I did learn, I know every mahjong piece in Mandarin. I can order virtually any, I can order all the meats and various types of dumplings, but the simple truth was I didn't really go into it with the cell phone thing, but not only did my close friends and colleagues and students all speak English and couldn't help me enough. I mean, they're always looking for ways to help. Anytime I was any place where I really ran into a language problem, I would send a quick text message to any friend, and I could be in Beijing, they could be anywhere in China, it's one system. They would send me back a text message in Chinese, which I would then just show, you know, read this, chump. Now, I never know whether they were really helping me or not, but I generally did. So again, the sad part is I fully expected and wanted to learn a lot, but they made it too easy for me, and I was too lazy to do the hard work, and that is a true regret that I did not come back with better Mandarin.
Good question.
Yes?
Would you please spell the name, spell the town, the city that you
Yes, Huaibei is spelled H-U-A-I, that's Huai, B-E-I, Huaibei. It actually, Bei means north, and Huai, there's a Huaibei and a Huainan, and they're either north and south of the Yangtze River, but Huaibei is H-U-A-I-B-E-I. Okay.
Is that the right phone?
And we will pass the hat for the future. Just you can put it.
Very good. Excellent. That's pretty.